thinking to the future of AI, I'm really excited to think about what that means when we can start to have an AI analysis of our CBCTs as well, because then we can really start to get into diagnosing more aggressive cancers and other life-threatening diseases. The thing that the advantage that dentistry's always had over traditional medicine is we have a really regular cadence with our patients. We are seeing our patients more often than really any other healthcare providers. And so if we think about, what are the value adds that we have in the future with technology, I think being able to treat our patients and diagnose things more proactively with greater accuracy is fantastic. And it's going to make a big, big difference in what we provide in the future.
Welcome back to another episode of the Dental Economist Show with me, Mike Huffaker. Hey, we've been doing this for about 4 months now, and I just want to say thank you to all of you out there that have been listening to the podcast. It really means a lot to us. If you have a chance, as you listen to this, please like and share, either on YouTube, leave reviews. It would really mean the world. And thank you so much for your support. Today, I'm joined by Dr. Eric Tobler, National Director of Clinical Affairs for Mortenson Dental and on the board of directors of the AADGP. Dr. Tobler earned his Doctor of Medicine and Dentistry from the University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and Master of Business Administration from Washington State University. Welcome to the show, Eric. How are you?
Fantastic. How are you doing, Mike?
I'm doing really well. So, look, I've got a ton of things I want to talk to you about. But before we get into kind of the serious world of business, I got to ask you about mixed martial arts. So when I've told folks that I was going to have you on the podcast, I had multiple people send me videos of the debut of the Luxador. And I trained BJJ for about 3.5 years, and I'm the cliche. I got my blue belt and then I quit. It happened to be when COVID hit also, so there was other circumstances. But do you still train mixed martial arts? Kind of what role does that play in your life? Can you talk about that a little bit?
I love mixed martial arts for sure, specifically BJJ. I think as a dentist and getting to be an old man, it's a lot easier on your body, but it still is intense, no doubt about it. Yeah, as I finished up with dental school and rolling into starting a practice with my dad and my brother, the demands of the practice were so heavy that I found myself getting a little bit lazier, a little bit chubbier. And so I was looking for something to do to get in shape. And I had a patient who was a fighter. And I asked him if I could train with him one day and absolutely fell in love with it. And so, yeah, for the next 5 or 6 years, I was really, really intense in mixed martial arts and just absolutely loved that. I got to be a corner man, which is even more fun than fighting. All of the adventure, none of the bruises. I love that part. And even, taking some of those, that medical training into account and strategy. But yeah, I did one professional MMA fight. Walked away on top, undefeated. 1-0. Yeah, it was my one and only fight, but it was a ton of fun. And I still do it a little bit, but not nearly as intense as I did at one point.
That's awesome. I was like, is this some type of conflict of interest, or are you just trying to create more work for dentists by going out there and being a striker in the ring? That's great. So BJJ was kind of, you've spent most of your time. What belt are you, out of curiosity?
Yeah, also blue belt. I'm an eternal blue belt. Yeah, I did so much of my training early on with that training partner that I mentioned was not really traditional jujitsu, and so I brought that on later on, doing it with the gi, I call them karate pajamas. That's a lot. It's a lot harder. It's a different world to do it with that.
Totally is. Yeah. It's funny. It's just going to spend my evenings rolling around on the ground with other men wearing pajamas. It's like, you know what? It's probably the most humbling activity that I've ever participated in, because I rarely ever felt that I was good. Basically every day I would go and be like, oh yeah, I'm just not very good at this. So I've got to try harder and keep going back. So it's great for a mental toughness exercise as well.
I think so as well. Yeah, there's so many lessons I think that I take from that to my, daily life. One of them is exactly like you said, like you can do hard things. And as you put in the work slowly, a little bit at a time, it feels like I'm just not getting better. I'm being beaten again and again, but slowly you see yourself, you find those wins as you go. Another thing that I love to talk about that is, I think, as I've grown as a leader, has become really important. Court McGee is a UFC fighter that I got to train with for years, and he is awesome. He won the Ultimate Fighter, I think, season 7, and just a really tough guy. But he had a saying that he would always say, "Slow is smooth, and smooth is fast." And I think that is so true for me now in business as I try to, help support Mortenson and we roll out technology and initiatives. My natural inclination, I'm a fast starter. I want to get going and I lose interest before the project even, gets fully rolled out. So it's really important for me to remember to step back, take time and set a really strong foundation and work with a lot of people, get a lot of perspectives on the front end. So that slow is the front end, taking the time to really, make sure that you're seeing it from every perspective. What does it mean for everybody to implement something like that? And then it gets smooth. And then on the back end, it's a lot better. Whereas I've definitely made some messes by trying to rush through the first parts of a project.
That's great, and a great segue. So, if you don't mind, can you kind of walk us through your career and take us through some of the key milestones?
My dad's a dentist, and so I was really blessed to be able to see dentistry, firsthand, really throughout my whole life. My dad had a small dental practice, 2 operatories in Provo, Utah. He's an incredible clinician, very driven, really always invested a ton in himself and his practice on training. And on the technology to keep him kind of up to date on the very most fun and exciting dental procedures. So that was really cool. To start as first the janitor, but eventually a dental assistant in that clinic and get to see it hands on. You could see from one operatory, you could see the whole office. It was just a teeny tiny little space. And so efficiency was really important. I got into dental school. My brother Nate also got into dental school, and so then we were able to join my dad practicing. And my dad made the incredibly bold and courageous move to go from that 2 operatory, highly successful and profitable practice to build a larger practice, 18 operatories, including an ortho bay in Lehi, Utah. So that was a big, scary move, and I just got to jump right into that. I was so fortunate to have him as a mentor, and from a clinical perspective, but it was a family business. So then my mom, sisters, they were all involved in it as well on helping to support the business. So I'm really fortunate to jump into the practice at that time, and we grew it really fast from a brand new practice to 2 doctors to 3 doctors within just a few quick years. So that was an exciting and scary time, probably scarier for my dad than for me. But as a new dentist, I was just soaking it up. I was just a sponge. The clinical side was so fun to be able to watch over his shoulder. And then on the business side, I was part of a mentorship mastermind group I got to attend with my dad that was called Apogee with Dr. John Meese. That was a great, great introduction to the business side of things as well. So as a young dentist, I was really, really fortunate to be surrounded by successful business people in dentistry as well as great clinicians. And that made all the difference in the world for me early on.
Dr. Meese is Team Training Institute. Is that correct?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's awesome.
I just had the chance to be out there with he and Wendy just this last week at their New Orleans annual summit event. It was so good. They put on a first class event every time. So yeah, really, really good there.
I've heard him speak a few times, and I always have a lot of takeaways after having the opportunity to listen. So you were in the family practice. How did that transition into your role at Mortenson?
So after those first few years of growth with our single practice, we had a few opportunities to expand locations. So we bought a practice with a friend of mine from dental school, and then one of my brother's friends from dental school joined us. So it was kind of just a natural organic growth, and we were already, out of necessity, we were already in really aggressive growth mode, right? So we just kind of kept it going. We already had that growth mindset. We grew to 5 practices. And then through that mastermind group I mentioned earlier, we got to know Dr. Wayne Mortenson and his group really well. And they were so kind and just willing to share all of their experience that we went out to visit their practice a number of times and eventually decided that we wanted to partner with them. So that's how Stonehaven, the group that my dad, Brett Tobler, and my family started. That's how we joined Mortenson Dental Partners about 10 years ago.
And when you were building Stonehaven, was that funded through bank loans and self-finance? There was no outside capital at that point. That was just all built through.
Yeah, and it became increasingly more difficult. We had a few different ownership structures throughout those early years. When we joined Mortenson Dental Partners, we had five doctor owners at that point, including my brother and dad and myself. And it was getting increasingly harder to get the bank to finance it, where we would have part of the ownership with another doctor who was just joining us, but I had to personally guarantee it with my house, with my business. Like it was getting a little bit heavy. So that was a big advantage to joining Mortenson. But really, I think the biggest driver for us as we as owners were wrestling with, considering it. One, we saw the trend. We saw where dentistry was headed, and we thought, this is a chance for us to be on the front end of this wave that we really felt like, based on what we had seen in pharmacy, what we'd seen in medicine. We're like, we see the writing on the wall here, and we think this is where dentistry is headed. And we liked the way that Mortenson was doing it. Their culture of doctor ownership was really meaningful, and I think a big deal for us. And then the other thing that was a huge deal was the employee stock ownership program that they had. So that alone was a really big deal because it gave Mortenson a chance to give every single team member across the board meaningful, real ownership in the company. And so, from a front desk person, practice manager, dentist hygienist, everybody actually owns shares in the company, which is a really, really big deal for retention. And so when I looked at what Mortenson was able to do from taking care of their team perspective, they were paying better than I was at Stonehaven. They had better health insurance. They had this employee stock ownership program, and their turnover was way, way lower. And that was really something for me that was like, I want that. And I think that, by joining them, we can accomplish some of that. So those were drivers. And then the last one was just their KPIs, their analytics, I should say. Their analytics were so much better than anything that we had ever seen in the industry. They were definitely on the front end of that. Dr. Will Engelman, who's recently just passed this year, was the president of Mortenson Dental Partners and an incredible guy. He was an orthodontist, but also passionate about programming. And he was really the one that created a lot of the analytics that we have. And since then, there's been so many great companies that have come into the dental space, and in many ways, they've caught up and surpassed Mortenson. I think, especially at the end user experience, there's a lot of really polished, great looking analytics that are out there. But with Mortenson having it all internally built, there's also a beautiful ability to pivot into the things that are going to serve us best as a company. Whereas, relying on a third party, sometimes they can do an amazing job, and sometimes your priorities don't quite match up with their priorities. So it's always on that eternal, like maybe on the next update sort of a list. So those were kind of the initial things that attracted us to joining with Mortenson.
That's very cool. Yeah, you definitely maintain control when you're doing your own data warehousing and building out your own analytics suite. And to your point, you don't necessarily have to align with the roadmap of the vendor. That's, are we going to get this new report, or can we make these changes that we want to make? So there's value in both. There's pros and cons, right, to either side. I love the employee stock ownership plan. Like I've talked to so many groups, and there's the old saying, you've seen one DSO, you've seen one DSO, because there's so many unique business models and ways of going about things. Is that still something that is in practice today, that is part of Mortenson with all of its practices and employees?
Yeah, it is, and I think now more than ever, it's a driver for kind of keeping our organization together. So Mortenson, another thing that's really unique about us is that we're fully dentist and employee owned. So as a fully employee owned, dentist owned company, we're led by dentists. We have I get the chance to lead our clinical subcommittees. We have over 70 clinicians across the organization, dentists, hygienists, and dental assistants that are volunteering their time to be part of these committees that focus on different aspects of our practice. But we just have a lot of engagement with our clinicians that really helps to drive the organization. And, with those core shareholders also being the clinicians that are treating patients every day, I think that's something that really kind of sets us apart and keeps us really grounded to patient care delivery. Like, what is going to make it so that we really do as great of a job as possible with our patients?
As your role has kind of transitioned from hands-on practitioner to a leadership role, how has your clinical vision kind of changed as well?
I would say it really goes back to that personality that I mentioned earlier. Like I love the project that I can start and finish quickly. So as a clinician, wisdom teeth, the most amazing thing ever. When I get to do dentistry once or twice a month now, I love sedation, I love implants and wisdom teeth. And the amazing part about being a clinician is I get to start a project and finish it all within an hour. And it is the box is checked. I get like a little adrenaline dump because I accomplished something, you know? And so I really love that part about being a clinician. And as I've gradually transitioned to doing less and less patient care and thinking more about the big picture, it definitely requires me to slow down and, think more about how does this impact all of the aspects of our business? How do we make sure that we take in a lot of different perspectives? As much as I love and adore, and I'm grateful for my dad as my mentor, at the time, a very, very narrow view of what dentistry could and should be. And as I've had the chance to work with now hundreds of great dentists within Mortenson, I see them delivering really, really good care in a number of different ways. And, there's times that we may disagree on philosophy, on how to treat a case. And I think getting those perspectives has been really helpful, but it also has helped me to maybe just step back and think, what are the things that we can do to most readily impact patient care on a larger scale? So I guess that's probably the biggest change, is just getting a broader view of what dentistry can be and recognizing that there's a lot of great ways to deliver care.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to touch on your dad again real quick, because obviously he played a huge part in your life and was a big role model for you. What are some of the lessons that you've really internalized that just have become ingrained in you, that you think about and that you share with others, that have come from your father?
Boy, I would say two. One is create a very high standard, create a high expectation for your team, and then hold them to that. And when they accomplish it, be their biggest cheerleader. And you will see, like, working side by side with him, I watched the way that our staff together, respected and for him, because they knew that he wasn't going to accept less than their best, and that when they gave their best, he was really truly going to appreciate that. And helping them to understand, I think, how their efforts translate into great care for our patients, because that's why most of us are in dentistry, is because we have a passion for caring for others. And so I think that holding a high standard and connecting that to care was something that I really, really learned from him. And then the other part is just make sure and stay passionate and stay engaged. He was constantly just going to one course after another to expand his skill set. And there was a few times that he was doing things that felt to me like really scary. And when I would ask him about it, he would just kind of make it sound like no big deal. Like, well, somebody's going to do it. Why not me? And if I take the time to get the equipment, the training, the support to do it, I can do as good of a job as anybody. And I think that, finding those areas that you're passionate and then investing in that and really making sure to pour yourself in it, I think that kept him passionate in dentistry through a really robust career.
You mentioned something there that I think is really powerful that people also overlook, and that is the power of praise and recognition of folks when they do a good job, and just how much of an impact that has. Because so many people, there's almost like an expectation of, oh, you're just always supposed to be great and always supposed to do incredible things. And just taking the time to actually recognize somebody for the hard work that they put in or the excellent quality of care that they provide, that's got to go a long way. Do you feel that that is part of the culture of Mortenson, that there is the recognition of a job well done?
Definitely. Yeah. I think there's internal systems that we have built in to celebrate, performance. We have an award we call the Love Award, which, we do things internally that are systemically built into it to help support that. But I think that just the culture of our organization, because again, we're a legacy company that are fully invested. We're not looking to turn over. It's just a very consistent company. Our growth has been kind of the same. Like, we've had a few moments of aggressive growth, but we're a pretty consistent company, and that consistency also comes through. And I think the way that our team members feel like they're taken care of and that they're like part of the organization and the growth that we have.
Yeah, let's talk about technology for a second. So, you mentioned how Mortenson was kind of cutting edge for many years as it related to KPIs and metrics and reporting suite, and really kind of ahead of their time and recognizing the importance of having all of that. Maybe talk a little bit about any technologies that have kind of helped Mortenson scale and helped the ability for you all to manage the business effectively at a scale of 100 plus offices? And maybe what some of the things that you're really excited about today that you think are really going to be pivotal to the future of dentistry?
Yeah, a few of the things over the past few years that have been awesome, but some of them not that groundbreaking, like adding scanners across the organization. I think that was really big. And we've seen an increase in our clinical quality with our removable specifically. So lower remake rates with our crowns. So that's been really exciting to see. I think most recently we've done a lot of work on internal software to support the automation of RCM, which I think that's a huge opportunity for us going forward, making those processes more predictable, more streamlined and automated. I think helps. Just prior to the Change Healthcare challenges that we had, we were about 80% automated with our RCM. So that was, I think, really, really substantial movement, and our team that's leading that is absolutely, I think, on the cutting edge of dentistry support in that way. So that's really fun. From the clinical perspective, which is my world, I think for me, I'm really excited to get CBCTs into more of our practices. One initiative we have rolling out right now is integrating XV Web, which is cloud-based imaging across all of our practices. So our clinicians are really excited about that, with the ability to share files back and forth easily, annotate them, send them to the patient, and then for claim submission as well. I think there's going to be some advantages there. The biggest one, I was mentioning CBCT. I think the ability to share CBCTs between clinicians has been a big challenge that we've had. And so an ability to share those DICOM files right there, we're really excited about that. Going along with imaging technology, we're implementing Overjet AI into a number of our practices. We're doing a pretty heavy pilot on that and continuing to just look and see what the opportunities are there. And the combination of XV Web and Overjet together, I think, is really cool with the integrated functionality there. I think that's going to really help our clinicians. That's one of the biggest challenges with the AI, is just making sure that we're engaging with it. Our clinicians are using it on a regular basis, and just having it right there naturally in the FMX or whatever else you're looking at. I think that helps a lot. And then using that AI, I think a few things that I'm really excited about, technology wise and thinking forward to dentistry, the help using AI to help us detect incipient lesions, and then treating those lesions early with non-surgically with Curodont. That's a product that we just got the new ADA code for, and everything that I'm seeing with that. We're using it quite a bit in our DSO right now within Mortenson. We're using it quite a bit, but the more I see the data that's coming out, the more excited I get. I think about, what we see as clinicians all the time is patients who from 12 to 18 years old had a bunch of MODs. They didn't floss and brush like they needed to when we were kids. In fact, my own mouth, I've got a mouthful of MODs from when I was a teenager. Now, as an adult, I don't really get cavities anymore. But if I do have something happen, it's always going to be recurrent decay. And that could mean on some of those bigger ones, I need to get a crown. It may just mean replacing the MOD. But that recurrent decay is an issue that I'm dealing with now at 40 some years old. And it will be the biggest challenge that I have for the rest of my life. So if we think about, if we can treat decay when it's early, non-surgically, and repair that enamel to its full state and leave that as a virgin tooth, what does that mean for the future of dentistry? It really, really has me excited.
It is really exciting. And I've heard a few people talk about that now. And I think it's really incredible to see practices embrace new technology. And it's a much better outcome and experience for the patient as well, which is, ultimately what we're looking to achieve. You mentioned as well with AI, challenges with it. And I think it's really smart the way that you all are doing it, because you're right. Having the integrated experience within the tool where you capture the images becomes really important, because the challenge that a lot of these technologies have, there's so many great tools out there. A lot of them integrate with practice management, but it requires multiple logins. You're going into different systems all the time, and you have a disruption in the clinical workflow. And when you have that disruption, even if it seems very small and it's just a couple clicks, it is enough of a barrier that it prevents somebody from actually using the tool and taking advantage of the technology. So it'll be really interesting. I'll be looking forward to kind of chatting with you again in the future to hear about what the outcomes have been that you've seen as a result of kind of integrating AI into the practices.
Yeah, the preliminary evaluations we've seen have been huge. We're seeing that our dentists are diagnosing more dentistry, and in certain cases, I expect that it'll actually help our dentists. It's going to help standardize our diagnosis. So there may be, just like the standard bell curve, there's going to be a few dentists who are maybe over-diagnosing. I think honestly, in dentistry, the bigger challenge that most of us in the industry have is underdiagnosis. And so, we have folks on both ends, and I think that's really going to help kind of standardize it and get folks more consistent in our diagnosis. I'm excited about that. The other thing that I think is really exciting is abscess detection. As I started to look at that, having AI to help with abscess detection is going to be huge because so often we have abscesses that are difficult to diagnose. And if you have AI kind of throw up the red flag, validate that with a CBCT, I think our clinicians are going to have a lot more confidence to treat abscesses that would otherwise go untreated. And if we think about the long-term effects that have, especially for our patients with comorbidities like diabetes, if you think about how they have an infection on their foot and that infection struggles to heal, combine that with the added bacterial load that we have from a dental abscess, it just makes the overall system less healthy and harder to recover for our patients. So I think that's going to be really big. And then, thinking to the future of AI, I'm really excited to think about what that means when we can start to have an AI analysis of our CBCTs as well, because then we can really start to get into, diagnosing more aggressive cancers and other life-threatening diseases. The thing that the advantage that dentistry's always had over traditional medicine is we have a really regular cadence with our patients. We are seeing our patients more often than really any other healthcare providers. And so if we think about, what are the value adds that we have in the future with technology, I think being able to treat our patients and diagnose things more proactively with greater accuracy is fantastic. And it's going to make a big, big difference in what we provide in the future.
Yeah, it's so important. And it makes you realize that we are still so early with AI. There's still so many applications to that technology on, of course, the imaging and x-ray side, but all throughout a practice. You mentioned RCM as well. And I know that there's a lot of companies doing some really interesting things there. I have to ask, as a clinical leader in the organization with a lot of dentists that you work with, how do you get the buy-in for adopting some of this new technology? Like, what is your approach? Because I've got to be honest, I've heard both sides, and I talked to some clinicians, and they're like, I don't need this. Like, I've been doing this for X amount of years. I already know what I'm looking at. Like, this is not a tool for me. How do you overcome that? I'm sure you've come up against some of that. And what's your approach?
Yeah, definitely. Again, with Mortenson as a doctor-led, doctor-owned organization, our board of directors are clinical doctors. And so it really, I think, has led for us to be an organization that relies heavily on sharing the experiences that our clinicians are having with one another and letting that naturally flow through. So I feel like as clinical director, when I have something I'm excited about that I think holds a big opportunity for our clinicians, really my job is just to talk about it as much as possible with as many people as possible and early on. And then I find those people who are excited about it, and I use those early adopters, try to help support their experience, and then give them a platform to share it with others. So internally within our company, we have a clinical forum for doctors to just chat about things that they're finding that works. We have clinical town halls every other month. We get together and just talk about what's working. And so that's kind of been how we've slowly over time nudged to use. So for example, within restorative materials, we're using basically the same few composites, the same few adhesives and things like that. And part of it is because we have a formula, we have really good pricing on those, but it's not mandated that our dentists use it. They just know that, okay, if 200 of my other respected colleagues are having success with this product, I trust that they're doing the right thing. So let's I'm going to jump on and use that product as well. So as we look to innovate, I would say compared to other companies, we're probably a little bit more slow moving, but I think we're also forward. We look forward maybe a little bit more than some other companies. We're willing to invest in technology that we think is going to make a difference, but for that to be consistent across the whole organization, it takes time, and that's just part of the deal. And I think it's worth it. It creates an environment of trust and mutual respect between the support company and our clinicians that I think is essential to really do it right.
Yeah, it ties back to kind of the very beginning of our conversation with the slow is smooth and smooth is fast. You're basically laying a foundation to allow for the successful adoption of technology and make sure that you get the appropriate buy-in with the team. I wanted to chat about another topic real quick. We just recently learned that Walmart Health was shutting down all of their locations. And I think this was really surprising to a lot of people. They had gotten up to roughly 50 Walmart Health locations. And initially, I know that there was really large plans to scale. I believe there's roughly 1,800 Walmarts or something along those lines in the country. So they had really just kind of started this. From my perspective, when I was kind of initially discussing with peers and talking to folks that were aware of kind of what they were looking to build, my initial instinct was like, well, if somebody's going to be able to figure it out, it's going to be Walmart. If it's going to be a low cost healthcare delivery model to bring, healthcare to a broader audience and to more folks across the country, it seemed like they'd be able to make it happen. And then we hear, they shut down, and the explanation, and obviously there's always way more to a story, is that they just couldn't make it profitable. And so I'm just curious from your perspective, when you hear something like that and, you're in this industry, like what does it make you think about?
Really, really surprising. Years ago in that mastermind group, I got to work alongside and learn from Dr. Andre Bruni. He did, I think at one point he had 10 practices or maybe a couple more right around there in Walmarts. They had some struggles with that. He ended up pulling the plug, both he and Walmart did. Looking back at that 10 years ago, I thought they weren't really taking advantages of the strength of Walmart at that point. They had the customer flow, which was the advantage, but a lot of other challenges. When I saw Walmart doing it this time, it really felt like they were focusing on supply chain efficiencies, which is what Walmart does best. So the fact that they pulled out on that totally threw me. So I think we're still probably taking away lessons to learn from this, but I know that in the dental space in general, we see profitability being compressed. So I think cost of technology is high, but more than that, workforce has really, really increased over the past few years. And then I think the other thing is that we have a number of DSOs that are fairly highly leveraged. And with interest rates being as high as they are, that expense is really adding a lot of pressure on other groups. I don't know that Walmart had those same pressures, although to some degree, certainly, I think workforce, they certainly did. But seeing them pull out just I think highlights that it is a competitive and a challenging industry. If you think about the margins that Walmart operates on the grocery side, they are such razor thin margins. I don't know how they could think that the margins they were getting with dentistry weren't worth it, other than just it must have just been a cost of effort. The initial entry into the space is really expensive, and I think they looked at the uphill climb that they had maybe before they got to where they wanted to be. Maybe they just saw opportunities elsewhere. But I think for the rest of us in dentistry, I think that's the challenge that we have, is that payer compensation is basically flat, but our expenses, both on interest rate, supplies, and on especially workforce, are really compressing profitability and making it so we have to be on our game if we're going to succeed.
I think it definitely speaks to the complexity of the business and the fact that, if you're a retailer, that just because there's a retail element of dental or healthcare, that it doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be so many similarities that it's going to just kind of fall into place. And I think you bring up a great point about the initial cost, and the investment of getting started is so high for any sort of dental clinic. And it's a publicly traded company. So while I don't think they have the same leverage concerns related to, the high interest rates, I do think that there's a general kind of softening in the economy that we're seeing from a consumer perspective, where consumers seem to be less willing Um, even to choose like elective procedures and to spend on higher cost treatments. And if you're Walmart, they're almost like a bellwether of the economy, and Starbucks in large part too. And Starbucks just recently missed all their earnings, and so I think it might just speak to maybe internally there's like, well, where do we focus? We know we're great here. We're starting to see the softening in the business. This is a really high capital expenditure up front for us. The margins are not what we expected. Like, let's go to our core business and really just try to execute there. So yeah, I mean, it'll be really interesting to kind of hear over the coming weeks. I'm sure there'll be, more stories told about it. But the sad thing, I guess, to me is that the mission of providing more affordable care to more people is a noble one.
Walmart has delivered that in so many other aspects of life that it seemed like, oh, maybe they can crack some of the challenges that traditional dentistry has struggled with or failed to accomplish. It did seem like they had potential to do things differently and bring in a different strategy that could be effective.
Yeah, when you think about increasing profit within your organization, it really feels like you mentioned inflation. It's still a real thing. It's funny to me in some sense. I think people misunderstand when you're starting to get inflation numbers and they're like, oh, it's down to 2% or it's down to 3. That's just a year over year number still. That's not a, hey, we're going back anywhere close to where we were 3 years ago or 4 years ago. This is just like we've already spiked 8, 10, 11%. Now we're just not doing it as large of a chunk this year versus last year, but we're not making up any ground. There's no de-inflation. It's not.
Right. It's still eroding profitability if we're not looking for opportunities to grow and do better. Yeah.
And so you're squeezed on the inflation part. Reimbursements, seem to be lower. Like where do you look? What do you do? How do you optimize? There's the costs of employees and the team. Where does that leave you, and how do you think about that?
I think that a lesson that we can learn from Walmart is what they did was went back to focus on their core business, right? They pulled out of dentistry, they're focusing on the core business. And I think that's actually where a lot of the opportunity lies for us within Mortenson. And I think that the industry as a whole is let's focus on our core business. What can we do using automation to make work easier for our team? Because there's a lot of aspects. If you take any one of our jobs, there's those aspects that are really frustrating. And, it makes it so that when somebody joins the organization, their ramp up is hard. For all of us, turnover of great team members usually happens within their first year or so. If it's going to, that's when our team is at highest risk. And so anything we can do to make their training more easy, try to support them through that, I think that's worthwhile. And then on the other side, for our dentists and clinicians, I think finding ways to inspire them to do dentistry in a way that keeps them engaged and has them excited about it is everything. One of my favorite parts of my job as clinical director is I get to lead our program for our dentists as they join the organization. It's called Top Docs, and we get together every other month in person. Sometimes it's in Kentucky, sometimes it's in Charlotte at Dentsply Academy. That's an incredible facility. And last year we were also in Nashville. And we just cover a pretty wide range of clinical topics. And it's not like you're learning how to do endo start to finish, but it's a whole laundry list of amazing uh, pearls and take homes and suggestions. So yeah, we do endo, we do clear aligners, we do a restorative session that my dad gets to lead. I love working with that. Yeah, our next session is with Dr. Bruder in Charlotte. And then we also do some leadership and communication training as well, because I think that's has a huge impact on our dentist's ability to perform well. And being a good leader in the practice is something that we don't talk enough about, and it's a huge challenge and opportunity for our clinicians.
That's awesome. So what do you call that initiative again?
Top Docs.
Top Docs, very cool. And is this a optional opt-in initiative, or is it doctors of a certain tenure within the organization?
When we started Top Docs out, it was only for doctors who were new out of school. But as time went on, we really got such great response from the program that we decided to try it out with our more seasoned doctors. So now it's suggested for anybody that comes into the organization. There's always exceptions, but I would say more than 90% of our clinicians that join the organization start with the Top Docs program. And having doctors who are joining a DSO on the back end of your career is a pretty common strategy for a lot of doctors as well. They kind of want to pull back on the stress of private practice as it was. And some of my favorite doctors that I've had the chance to work with over the past few years have been doctors who were kind of in that. As one doctor put it, he said, I'm in the last quarter of my career, but guess what? The last quarter of the game is actually the most exciting. And I'm having more fun today than I ever did in owning my own practice. And I think the other thing that was great is they really truly appreciate the quality of good continuing education. And we try to bring in really engaging speakers and hit on topics that you can take home and use on Monday. And yeah, the response for that's been really good. And then the mentorship and networking that takes place is a lot more dynamic and interesting when you have dentists at different points in their careers. And so, I try to throughout that program really make it a very open, collaborative environment. So, if one of the speakers is saying something that you don't quite agree with, let's talk about why, because the why is where the really good conversations come in. There's always that gray area, and talking about the intricacies of the gray area and why one philosophy and another both can work. They can both be good philosophies, but there's areas that there may be some friction there. And I think talking about those is really where we bring out a lot of good learning and discussion.
There's so much that could be unpacked there. First off, you're creating this awesome community. So I'm not clinical. I'm not a dentist. I've been in sales my whole life. But I have to imagine, and it's the same for me in my role, when you're in a role as a leader within an organization, within a practice, within an office, sometimes it can be lonely. And so, having the opportunity to have this regular cadence to sit and meet with peers and colleagues who have walked your walk and have the chance to just share and discuss what's going on and what's happening, like the value in that probably can't be overstated.
That's actually one of my favorite parts about that program for sure. Is just creating those relationships. So we focus on the night between the two training sessions. We always try to do something really fun that gives folks a lot of flexibility to connect and share cases. And then that's the other thing that we do in the course that's really fun is when a doctor has a really fun case that they just completed, something they want to brag about or something that they're stuck on, they'll bring it, and together we set aside the first hour or two of every one of those meetings to just share what's new and what's going on. So most recently, we did a cosmetic training with Dr. Marvin Berlin that was awesome. One of our doctors took his smile test drive methodology, used it, and she has before and after photos through the whole process. This is how I talked to the patient about it. This is how they went from being unsure about doing this to confident, and then here's the end result. So getting to share those kinds of cases and clinical successes that we have is really a super fun part of that group.
I like that a lot. I think that's a really powerful initiative. And again, when you were talking about, what had been instilled in you by your father and, the importance of passion, you're creating an environment where that passion continues to be fed. And also the fact that, you specifically call out that there can be different topics that maybe are somewhat contentious or there might be opposing viewpoints, but you create an environment where it's okay to have those conversations because that's where like the real growth happens. If you're always stuck in an echo chamber, hearing everybody just talk about the same thing in the same way and with no alternative perspective, you never really have to like kind of stretch your thought process and think about things in a different way. So, it sounds like you guys are doing a lot of really, really positive things with that. Is there anything else that you're really excited about that you guys are working on at Mortenson these days?
I would say the other thing is just internal growth in general. So, for us, the initiative we have is we call it Project Care. And it's really just looking at within our existing practices, do we have operatories that are unequipped that we could equip to serve our patient base better? Are there equipped operatories that we could utilize, making sure that all of our equipment is absolutely just running well, that the technology's there, the Wi-Fi and the internet connections are solid, like making sure that our core business is running as smoothly as possible. And just by focusing on that last year, we were able to see tremendous growth, like 20% growth to our business just on focusing on the things that our clinicians were asking for and looking at the opportunities to serve the patient base with the practices that we had. So I think that's the other part that is really working well for us right now, is just that focusing on the core business. What can we do to make sure that our practices are all looking beautiful, up to brand standards, and functioning in a way that supports our clinicians without frustrating them?
Now, you're also on the board of directors for the AADGP, and there was an event that took place earlier this year. I think it was maybe beginning of February. And I've noticed that there's been kind of some ongoing webinar series. Can you share a little bit about kind of what the purpose of the AADGP is?
Yeah, the AADGP stands for American Academy of Group Dental Practices. And that's really where it focuses. We actually, this year was the 50th anniversary of that organization, which is mind blowing to me. I didn't even realize that there was anything there to support group practices 50 years ago. It feels like, it's trending to become more and more popular. It feels like every convention now is a group dental practice convention. There's so many of those out there. So in the sea of amazing conventions that there are to consider, I think that what sets the AADGP apart is really a focus on what can we do to help clinicians who are also running a small group practice or group of practices. What can we do to help support them to bridge that gap as they start to scale? Because that's really such a huge challenge. Having a single practice that's really efficient, has good systems, and is financially successful is a very different skill set than it takes to run a group of 5 or 10 practices with those same challenges. And so I think that's really where the AADGP shines, is helping young businesses as they grow find good resources from the financial side, from the HR side, every aspect of your business that you think of that you need to be supporting: operations, IT, legal. The AADGP really tries to focus our annual meeting on checking each one of those boxes that a clinician would, or a young group would need to help scale up their business. And, answering the questions like, when am I big enough to have a CEO? When am I big enough to require a dedicated HR person? When am I big enough to consider turning my company into an ESOP company? All of those kinds of things, I think, are really the questions that the AADGP does a good job answering. And I think it's why the meeting is a really valuable one for those groups. This last session was amazing. We had some really cool stuff. I got to interview Jay Leno. That was crazy. He was such an incredible entertainer. He did some stand up and then a question and answer with the audience. And he was just such a sincere, genuine person. It was really, really fun. But as much as I loved him, when we look back at the feedback, people like Jay, they loved the dental business experts that we had. So, specifically, we had an amazing panel that was kind of employee ownership versus private equity ownership. That was a debate that was moderated by Bill Newman. He did such a good job. And our CEO, Bill Beckner, was there. Bob Winder was representing the private equity side. He did an incredible job. James Pennington was also. And the way they did it was super engaging. I mean, everybody was just on the edge of their seats. But, there was a panel on which KPIs to look at, which was really, really good. Another panel discussion on perspectives from CFOs from different companies. So, panel discussions oftentimes in their worst form end up being a few representatives of different companies, each giving their infomercial one at a time, and then answering one prepackaged question that doesn't really dig in. These were not softball type discussions. These were hard hitting, really interesting, engaging conversations. And I thought those panels were awesome. And as we look to the next year, I had the chance to get together with the board of directors for the AADGP, all amazing clinicians from across the country who have that same passion for how do we help young groups get the support they need. This next year, our meeting is going to be February 6th through the 8th. So about the same weekend as we've had it. It's going to be at the Omni in Orlando. That was one of the other pieces of feedback. People are a little bit tired of Vegas, understandably. If you're there for more than a couple of days, that city will steal your soul. I love Vegas. That's where I went to dental school, though. I really, really do love it there. But excited to mix it up. So we'll be in Orlando at the Omni. Beautiful, beautiful facility and a really nice spot. So that's a meeting I'm looking forward to. And that next one, we're going to focus on, along with the panel discussions and some high quality dental speakers. We're also going to be focusing on a workshop format that brings it down to a smaller group that you can really work through some of your individual challenges and questions. So looking forward to that this coming year.
That's great. I really like that format, and I was unable to go to the show this year. I went to the year before. The year before was Penn and Teller, which was really fun. It was great to see that. But I did hear about the debate even after the event, not having been there, and so it really kind of resonated with folks to have opposing viewpoints and different perspectives heard. And of course, you mentioned Bill Newman. He's really great at moderating panels along those lines. So it's nice to see some things done differently and not the infomercials, which everyone sees through that because like, okay, they're just advertising their stuff. Nobody really wants to hear this. It's not adding a ton of value.
The infomercials can be good, but it's getting into what we were talking about before with the clinical. Where's the gray area that people disagree? Getting into that is where the interesting discussions happen. And it can happen on a vendor level. It could happen, with any software. If we're willing to be a little more vulnerable, I think the conversations are a lot more meaningful, but it's a little scary too.
Throw me up there with HS1 and with CareStack and Curve, and we can all talk about what actually is important with practice management software and what you should be looking to accomplish.
If there's anybody who's listening to this podcast that's in charge of helping to create conferences, that's my ask to you. Like, make your conferences better. Make them so that people really get engaged and challenged when they go to those.
So you've already shared some of this, and I can tell that you have kind of a personal belief of making sure that you are continually educating yourself and continually learning. And you've shared some of the things that you are already doing in this regards. But where do you go to learn? Like, what are some of the methods and modes that you take?
So part of being Mortenson is we get lots of great opportunities. I get to see what other doctors are doing for continuing education and, see where they're most passionate. I think there's a lot of really exciting innovations in the 3D printing space. We're not really doing much of that right now, but I see where that's going and really excited about it. Zest just opened up a new training facility in Las Vegas that I'm really excited about. We're going to be doing some stuff with them in the coming year to train our doctors on locator and locator fixed, denture to overdenture to hybrid transitions. I think that those hold a lot of opportunity for us, and the simplicity of workflows there. I'm really excited about that. I'm passionate about implant dentistry, so anytime I get the chance to either learn about that myself or help promote it within our group, I'm really always passionate about that. But I think really I'm just incredibly fortunate that my role allows me to see a lot of continuing education. I get to hear great speakers from across the country, and I don't know that there's one area I love learning about. I just like all of it and understanding. I would say, actually, if I had to say one thing, it's when the education challenges my current perspective on dentistry. I always love that, and also get uncomfortable with it.
Yes. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. And we can just tie this in a bow, which is the essence of jujitsu, is being very comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah. And being tied in a bow too.
That's right. Quite literally. Well, Dr. Tobler, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Such a pleasure, Mike. Thank you.
The Dental Economist Show is brought to you by Planet DDS. To find out more about how cloud-based dental software by Planet DDS helps unleash dentists and their staff to focus on patient care, visit www.planetdds.com. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes by following wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening.